Hey guys, thanks for being here. Before we hop into today's video, I just wanted to give some trigger warnings. While not explicit, I did want to let you know before we dived right in. Enjoy! Okay, let me get myself together. I'm debating if I should... Okay. Is that glare gonna annoy me? I think it is. That glare is gonna bother me. But it would also be helpful if I could see. Does the glare bother you? Sometimes if I watch video, if I keep my head tilted down this whole entire time, there should not be a glare. So we're gonna keep the glasses on because seeing is believing. Hey everyone, my name is Bria and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking a little bit about my debt story, about how I got 4,000 and something odd dollars in debt. But right now I just kind of wanted to talk to you guys about how my photography business essentially got me into debt. To be fair, it's not all photography business stuff that's necessarily gotten me into debt. Like anyone, I do have student loan debt. In this particular video, however, I'm not going to be really addressing that, only because my student loan debt to me was a really great investment and I'm already kind of seeing the return on my English degree. I don't think I'll ever regret my English degree in the sense that like when I talk about the debt that I got from it, I don't think I'll ever be negative about that debt. But in terms of this debt, which is revolving credit card debt, I am over it. I'm over having it. It's given me a lot of anxiety and I think I've paid an insane amount towards it over the years. I would say I got this debt around 22-ish. I am 25 now. But something that occurred to me was that a lot of the reasons why I got into debt was more because I wasn't that secure with money, and my mental health really affected my relationship with money, and so it made me a bad handler of money for a good period of time until I got therapy. And so I just really wanted to like shine light on the mental health aspect of debt and accumulating debt, just because I feel like, you know, particularly in this YouTube space, I feel that a lot of YouTubers, personal finance gurus, things like that, they all specifically talk about a neurotypical Western American viewpoint of money and debt. I watched this one woman, Zoe Pritchard, here on YouTube. Her content's really cool. I found her through her like kind of quitting her job video, but she's Canadian, and she was explaining how like in Canada there is this thing with like debit cards, how it's more easy to kind of use your credit card versus a debit card. Credit cards are more accepted, and so you do kind of have that revolving debt constantly, but the relationship with it is different. Are you kidding me? I literally just charged this fucking thing. But anyway, all of that to say is that all of these things, the diverse way that, you know, everybody spends and manages their money, has inspired me to kind of think about like my own journey with debt and think about what it was that kind of got me there. I think when you kind of look back on a debt journey, it's kind of hard to pinpoint the why, or like why you felt something was so important, so valuable to you that you felt like you needed to go into debt for it. So looking at like my mental health and looking at the debt that I accumulated, a lot of the spending was a symptom of like my mental health. But this especially became dangerous, or the pattern became an issue when I started to build my own business. And so my friend Teri Hofford, she is an amazing photographer in Canada. I will link her YouTube channel her website, as well as this blog post that she made that inspired this question. She wrote about the fable, that one fable about the 5 monkeys, and they all are in this, like, I don't know, I guess they're in like a glass box or something. It's like some fake study done that was shared by like TED Talk people and priests and whatever. Read her blog, it gives you the whole background information on that. She pointed out a bunch of questions that were really important to reflect on, like what does it mean when you're following your Uncle Tim's like advice when running a business, or listening to some other person saying, oh, you shouldn't do this because of X, Y, and Z, but you feel like it's the right path for you. And that definitely does like relate to what I felt when I was building my business, but it also caused me to ask this question of myself, which was, what was my belief when I was building my business? I journaled about this, like I have like my iPad here on Notion, and so I journaled about it a little bit, and I came to this realization that when I was building my business, I didn't have a lot of trust in myself. I didn't have the foundation, the strength, the mental capacity, the right mental health, or good mental health, in order to trust my tuition. One, trust my tuition, but then also know what my tuition is. I wasn't at the point where I could confidently make decisions for myself. And I had really bad self-esteem. I was caught in these cycles that I didn't really understand. And so I spent so much money trying to get the information that I thought I didn't know. Now, that's not to say that like the photography education that I invested in, it all was a wash. I feel like there's so many tools that were so beneficial to me, and I can name them off the top of my head. Like I know the tools that worked for me as a photographer personally. I knew what was right for my business. I knew what tools worked for my business. But when you're in these like Facebook groups, photography communities, what tends to happen is that like everyone's trying to sell their course. Everyone's trying to promote in some way. You'll find that there will be a lot of people who are saying like, oh, you know, you won't be able to make it if you don't invest in this person's course because they teach you X, Y, and Z, and you won't be able to make it if you don't invest this amount of money. And it got to the point where like, you know, people were being oversold at some point. And in one of these groups, like one person was even like, well, I think it was the person who actually owned the group too. They were saying something like, if you're not willing to go into debt for your business, then you're obviously not cut out to have a business. And it was that kind of toxic rhetoric that kind of ran rampant. And I guess for me, like, it's like I didn't want to come off as someone who didn't believe in myself, who didn't believe in myself enough to go into debt and pay myself back, or to pay back a creditor or anything like that. I didn't want to come off as someone who didn't want the dream enough. And that's like a long standing thing with me. I always felt like when it came to like goals or dreams of mine, I always felt like I wasn't putting in enough. And a lot of like friends or family, mentors, teachers, they would even say to me like, you're not putting in enough. Like, and it always felt like you are not enough. And looking back on all the things, all those events, that stuff obviously wasn't true. I was giving my all to the full capacity, but like their all is way different than what it looks like for me as someone who isn't, I don't know the right term for me, right? Like as someone who like really struggles with a certain mental health diagnosis. I'm not at the point where I'm ready to share what it is, but at least like on the internet. But with someone with a diagnosis such as this, it's like it makes sense that I wasn't, I needed to do things a little differently. But in these groups, it was like, if you are not willing to dive into debt, then you weren't good enough, you're not cut out for this. And that's such a dangerous rhetoric for anybody. You know, you don't know anybody's relationship with money. To be honest, my business, I went $4,000+ into debt. My business made double that, a little over double that. I would have been able to pay off this debt that I accumulated for this business. However, it didn't work that way. I wasn't good with managing money. I wasn't focused. I couldn't prioritize. I was feeding a pit in my stomach, essentially, so that I could feel like I was keeping up, so that I felt like I was getting all the right materials, that I was doing the right thing, and I was kind of keeping up with the Joneses, essentially. And it was kind of weird too, because like in these groups, if you expressed any sort of uncomfortability or like just hesitation about not accumulating debt in order to sustain your business, like a lot of women in particular in the group were so, looking back on it now, these women are my heroes. They're awesome. They were just like, hey, I'm not taking out debt in order to fund my business. What are some other ways to do this? And people would shame them. People would shame them for setting that boundary, for being like, no, I'm not going into debt. I'm not doing anything crazy like this to build a business. I'm building a business so the business can work for me. I'm not trying to feed this monster. And those women are amazing. I didn't do it, you know what I'm saying? But they were kind of shamed for it and kind of made out to seem crazy. And it was just such a toxic environment. It was such a toxic environment. But there is something sinister about some photography educators taking advantage of people who really want to build a business. There's always this promise, this like magic pill promise that all of these marketers give to you, these photography educations give to you. And, you know, just, it's kind of sinister in a weird way. I don't know, not a fan. But thinking about this has kind of brought me to a place in considering my mental health at that time when I was building my business, and just in general, like throughout my lifetime. Again, not the point where I'm ready to say my diagnosis, but looking at the debt and looking at you know, repayment systems, thinking about how I might want to manage my money, doing a lot of trial and error. I would say that most of my money management has been trial and error. There was a point where the credit card, my last credit card that I'm paying off right now, there was a point where it was at $125. No, $175 left to pay back. And I talked to a friend about it, and I was like, oh my god, I want to pay this back. I want to pay this back right now and just be done with credit. And she's like, no, because it'll take like half your paycheck. I was working like a fairly low wage job at the time. She's like, it'll take like half your paycheck. Like, you know, you didn't get paid that much this time around, so just like wait till your next paycheck. Literally, I kid you not, within that 2 weeks, I went and rose that credit card again. And I never mentioned it to my friend ever again. There was so much shame. And that's kind of the first part of the cycle that I had to address, because I would get into these like really bad cycles with my mental health. And one part of that cycle was feeling shame. And for me in particular, it was shame around success. I never felt really deserving of success, and it's not because, I don't know if it's necessarily because I never felt like I deserved it, but I always had this feeling that I was never supposed to be above everyone, and that humbleness was always like super celebrated. That was always a trait that was kind of admired about me, but looking back on it, it wasn't humbleness. It was this feeling of feeling beneath other people. And I never wanted to feel higher than anyone. I never wanted to be better than anyone. I always thought that me being second best was accepted. It was what was meant to be. It is how it is. And that if I ever did better, then I was somehow doing something wrong to somebody. And it's kind of fucked up, right? Like, that's to put it plainly, like, it's kind of fucked up to feel that way all the time. And I would feel that way all the time. I was funny because I was telling my family this, and I don't think they ever felt like it was a big deal, but I started to comfortably wear like platform shoes and high heel shoes around like 24, 25-ish. And I was like, I finally feel like it's okay for me to wear heels, because I finally feel confident enough to stand in my power and to be okay with being above somebody, like physically being above somebody, not like meaning like I'm better than anyone, but physically being above somebody. I feel like I don't have to play small anymore. And part of me feels like it might have been like a survival tactic, just because, like, you know, I am a Black girl in a predominantly white state. Like, I grew up here, but I was in predominantly white schools, and it was easier to survive and emotionally easier to survive if you made yourself smaller, and more people liked you if you were smaller. And that was basically my experience with that. I'm not sure if even if that is just like the origin of everything. But I can pinpoint a lot of moments in my life where I felt like I had to make myself smaller, or that was how I kept people wanting to be around me. And so that shame around success was a hard one to get through. And still sometimes it's kind of difficult. Like, I'm worried about overshining someone or getting too much attention sometimes, and sometimes I have to say to myself, no, like, you work hard and you are deserving of the accolades that you receive and the affirmations that you receive based off of your success. And so yeah, that's a tough one. And so that shame had to be addressed so that I wasn't essentially sabotaging my own success. But then unfortunately, while I did have shame around success, I also had shame around failure. So again, I always expected to be less. Like, that was the framework in which I got things, and I was always expected to be less. And I always felt like I was expected to be a joke. I was expected to be forgotten and not cared about. And so I literally felt like I meant nothing to people. I felt like I meant nothing. I felt like I was nothing, and that I'll never be anything. And a lot of people have made me feel this way, both like friends and family. Like, I'm really sensitive around like being called stupid. I don't like it, and there's like particular times where it makes me feel even worse. Like, you know, with this financial journey, I get really sensitive about it too, because it's like I've had to go through therapy in order to be able to do something as small as like have money in my account. Like, to everybody else it's like, oh, like, you know, I just have money in my account, like things like that. No, I had to work through years of trauma in order to be able to maintain a dollar amount in my account. Not a dollar amount, but like to maintain money in my account, you know what I'm saying? Like, that was work. And whereas everyone else is like, oh, that's just like, why can't you do that? I'm like, I don't know. Like, at the time I was like, I don't know, you know. I don't know. It got to a point where, like, when it came to failure, I always expected myself to fail. I felt bad that I was going to fail, and I felt like people were expecting me to fail too. And so I really struggled with depression and anxiety. I also struggled with PMDD, which is premenstrual dysphoric disorder. Separately from my actual diagnosis, this is also kind of something that impacts the cycle, and this cycle kind of follows my menstrual cycle. And so this, oh my god, PMDD would take me out. And so sometimes like I couldn't even get out of bed because like my period symptoms were so bad, or my mental health was shot because of these period symptoms, on top of just like the regular depression cycles that I face and the regular anxiety cycles that I face. So I remember all these moments, and sometimes these moments literally pop up in my head when I'm going through a depression dip, where I was just like, I'm not good enough, or people don't understand what I'm going through, because I was just being read as like lazy or not applying myself or not caring, when it really was like, no dude, I literally can't brush my teeth. What do you mean you want me to walk 2 miles to class? You know what I'm saying? And then once those voices were like gone, once those people were not saying that to me, I started to say those things to myself, and I started to self-harm in a way where it would be in relation to my finances, or it would be in relation to my body. So I haven't like physically self-harmed myself in the way that a lot of people know self-harm to be since I was in high school, but another cycle of that would be kind of like binge eating. And the binge eating would kind of feed two monsters at the same time. It would destroy my budget, and it would destroy how much money I had, and it would destroy my body. I think more than anything that kind of got me in terms of like the financial self-harm or like the emotional self-harm that I was doing was the fact that I would get caught in these cycles. And one thing that I wish I could explain this, but I would get into the cycle where I would drop $300 to $400 on something. Maybe it's like a hobby or an interest, or it's like some sort of like huge impulse spend, and I would drop $300 to $400 on it, and it would just sit there, and I would get a really big boost of like serotonin from it. I call them my serotonin buys. I would get a really big boost of serotonin from it, and then I would crash. I would crash and I would burn, and I would be depressed for about a week or two. And then I'll feel normal, and I'll kind of get back up, and I'll be like, oh my god, like I'm gonna get my act together, and then the cycle would just repeat again. And so for me, like spending money or like impulse buying, it's not as simple as like stop doing it. There was a lot of like emotional work to do that. Like I had to do a lot of interpersonal work. I had to do a lot of like shadow work. I had to do a lot of journaling. I had to do a lot of therapy. I had to catch myself when I was in these cycles. I started to journal about gratitude and about the things that I love. I made specific spending rules for myself in order to address these things, or at least to cut down the spending. And it's been slow and it's been methodical, and not everyone understands it. You know, when I was like going on my journey through like YouTube and like looking at all the content made on this platform, it's always just like, stop spending. Why are you spending? And it's always like this like intense like rhetoric around like a budget. A budget is so personal to everybody that everyone has to have their own journey. So the people who've helped me the most was like Chelsea from the Financial Diet, Asia Dang, oh my gosh, I always forget this one lady, but I'll link her down below. She made a specific video of budgeting tips for people with ADHD, and that's helped me a lot. There's like cash envelope stuffers, like just seeing the breakdown. Like one breakdown that really helped me was the 50-30-20 rule. My breakdown looks a little bit different just because I'm a contractor, but it's like you find resources that really work for you and they help you, and those are the resources you want to stick with. But there's always going to be someone in the background talking about how you're wrong. So when I would hear those advices of like stop buying coffee, or like stop like spending money, like you don't need that, or whatever, it caused like such deep shame in me that it would just start the spiral all over again. That was like a whole thing of building up my intuition. And so instead of being like, no, these are the rules I made for myself, it's like, no, why? Now we have to address, why is it that you don't trust yourself? Why is it that you can't hear yourself? What do you sound like? I literally spent like a year and a half in therapy learning what I sounded like. That is essentially my debt story. But I guess I'll just tell you some numbers now. Okay, I feel so bad because I didn't want to do this. I just wanted to film it all on one camera, but I'm so sick of this thing dying on me and I didn't charge it. But I just wanted to share with you. I started this year with $4,338 in credit card debt with no emergency fund, and as of today I have $2,647.64 of credit card debt. So I paid a little over 2,000, maybe, or a little under $2,000 of credit card debt, which smashed my goal for Q1 and Q2 this year. And I established an emergency savings fund that is nearly at $2,000, as well as I found like a budgeting breakdown that works for me. And so it was funny because as I was like thinking about all of this and like writing it and journaling about it in order to prepare this video, I found myself sitting with a lot of shame around money, and I felt myself get tense in my body, and I was like, is anyone even gonna see like how amazing it is that I did this? Like, is this not gonna seem like a big payoff number, considering like how long, I mean, I've had this debt since I was 22, right? Considering like how long I've had the debt, but I've had this debt since I was 22. And after doing all of that mental health work and doing that deep dive work, at the beginning of the year, before I turned 25, I paid off like over $1,800 in credit card debt and established an emergency savings fund for myself and established a budget that worked for me in 5 months after that years of work, and it's sustainable. I think that's definitely something to be proud of, and I'm definitely proud of myself about that. And you have to celebrate the small wins, you know. While I'm not a Dave Ramsey girly, let it be known here, I'm not a Dave Ramsey girly, but when I was a Dave Ramsey girly, there was this story, and I think about this story all the time, about this woman who could barely make it by, and she had like barely any money to put together an emergency savings fund. And I think she like went up to Dave during some conference or whatever and was like, I've worked my butt off and I know it's not a lot of money. It took me years to do, but I finally got $500 in my emergency savings account. And I think about that story all the time, and I think about how much of a win that was for her. And because of that, I'm not going to diminish my win. So thank you for watching. I appreciate you being here. If you want to join me on this journey, feel free to tell me about your journey with debt as well. I know it's like really normalized in our culture, and I know that like it's really hard to get out of too. At the same time, it can feel crippling, but you know, despite all of the bad information out there, despite all of the annoying information out there. I do think that genuinely a lot of people want to see other people win. So I would love to hear your wins down in the comments about your financial goals and where you're trying to go. Thank you again for watching. If you like this video, I would love if you leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye!